I decided to let Mom come live with us when my husband suddenly told me about it. I almost dropped my cup. You can't just drop news like that on me, it's too much. Mom was feeling really down after being left alone, so he thought it would be good for her to stay with us for a while. She'd move in next week. I was already worried about my mother-in-law, who had just lost her husband in a car accident, but why did he decide on this without asking me? I was sad about the sudden news, but I told myself it would be okay for a short time. However, I was shocked when the next week my mother-in-law showed up with a moving company. What's all this? What's happening? She had sold her house because she thought it would be nicer to live here. If I'm moving, I might as well do it properly, she said. When I looked at my husband, he was cheekily smiling at me. Didn't I tell you I was going to invite Mom to live with us? This is my house, and you need to follow my rules, he said. What are you talking about? This is the place I rent for my cousin, Jaleh, remember? Had my husband forgotten that important detail? I know, but I'm the one paying the high rent here. If you can't follow my rules, you'll have to leave, he said. Although $3,000 is just half of the rent, I wanted to argue but chose to face the situation directly, so I kept quiet, packed my things, and decided to leave the house quietly. This wasn't working out. After leaving the apartment, I sighed deeply and made a phone call. My name is Laura Walker. I'm 37 and I've been running a facial spa for 5 years now. I went to school to become a beautician, but during my studies, I realized that true beauty begins with healthy skin. After years of working at a salon, I decided to start my own business. My husband, Peter, and I've been married for 4 years. We first reconnected at our 8-year high school reunion. At the reunion, we were all talking excitedly about our love for natural stone bracelets. Suddenly, Peter suggested, "If you want to improve your love luck, maybe you should try rose quartz." Surprised, I asked, "How do you know that?" He replied, "I got interested in gemstones recently. They seem promising for love." Peter, known in school for his messy hair and not caring much about looks or rumors, impressed me with his knowledge. Later at the party, I found out he also liked my favorite anime and shared many interesting facts about it. I was so charmed by him that we started dating, and today is our 2nd dating anniversary. He casually suggested, "Let's get married next year." It felt like a proposal, and since Peter was always fun and easy to be around, I happily agreed. 3 years into our marriage, my cousin Julie, who was like a sister to me, gave me a fantastic opportunity. However, it was a big step for us, maybe too big for Peter. Then another surprise came when Julie's husband Frank, who had always been successful, suggested we stay in their condo abroad for 3 years while they were away. Shocked. I said, "No way. I can't afford the rent for a place like that." A few years ago, Julie became an independent management consultant and has been making more money ever since. One day she said to me, "Laura, didn't you mention you can't make more than $75,000 a month? Why don't you try living like a celebrity? If you get used to that kind of lifestyle, it might solve all your problems." She was suggesting I change how I think about money. Our condo's rent is $40,000, but I'll let you have it for $7,000. What do you think? Even thinking about it made my head spin. My current rent of $2,500 already felt like a lot, and I really liked our place and didn't want to move. But Julie was okay with renting it out as an investment. The owner of Julie's condo, Mr. Patrick, supports entrepreneurs. When Julie told him my story, he agreed right away. "It's a good offer, but can I talk it over with Peter before I decide?" I asked. "Of course," Julie replied. "I'll be looking forward to your response." I've been running my salon for 6 years, but no matter how hard I tried, I thought I'd never make more than $20,000 a month. So the idea of earning more was already putting pressure on me. When I got home, Peter was busy with his new workout routine. I cautiously brought up Julie's offer. "Why not? It'd be a bigger space and super close to work," he said. "Peter, who worked as an in-house designer, liked spending time only on things he enjoyed. Living in Julie's condo would reduce his commute significantly, but it'll be a bigger financial burden than before, I pointed out. It's for your growth, isn't it? He responded. I'm fine either way, so just work it out with Julie. Even after getting married, Peter seemed indifferent to anything outside his interests, except maybe for the shorter commute. As I explained the living terms and the rent, he just nodded. I wondered if he was really listening. After thinking it over, I decided to take on the challenge and moved into the luxury condo. My husband and I agreed to split the rent, each paying $145,000, and I would handle all our living expenses. I was ready to bet on these 4 years of my life. Wow, this is amazing. That's incredible. Those were our first reactions when we stepped into the high-end rental property. The condo even had a closet just for shoes, and the living room, which was over 430 square feet, seemed perfect for hosting big parties. The standout feature was a white leather sofa in the middle of the vast space. We were told to use the furniture and appliances as they were, which were more luxurious than anything I'd ever afford. At first, the place felt too fancy, almost uncomfortably so, like we were staying in a hotel suite. But then I started to understand what Julie meant about changing our perspective by getting used to this environment. And so our life in the luxury condo began. In just 4 months, the place that once made us tense started to feel like a sanctuary. It even changed my approach to work since we moved here for a reason. I started thinking about using the location to its full potential. I thought about hiring someone for my salon and possibly doing workshops, which people had been asking for. You should go for it, Laura, my husband encouraged. I run a beauty-related social media account and had requests for a while to host workshops or tea parties where people could talk to me directly. Since then, I've been learning and trying new things every day. It was exhausting, but the results were well received, and soon I was making over $20,000 a month. The environment also had a big impact on my husband, Peter. He probably thought it would be problematic for the neighbors if he continued to neglect his appearance. Now he makes sure his hair is neat and dresses sharper when he goes out. But as a result of getting ready, the house ends up a mess. I even started getting approached by people at work who I've never talked to before. I bet even I think you look the best you ever have. The first year after we moved, everything was going really well until my mother-in-law, who learned about our new place from the New Year's cards, came to visit. She likes to take classes and is quite fancy and self-centered. What an amazing house! I never imagined Peter would move into a place like this. I'm so proud, she said, as surprised as we were. Oh, this house is great. I can step up when I need to, Peter said, cutting me off and grinning as if he had rented the place himself. He then gestured for me to be quiet. The class I attend is close by. It's easy to stop by on my way home, so I'll be dropping in from time to time, she added. Sure, just make sure to let us know before you come over, I replied, though I had a bad feeling about this. After retiring, my father-in-law enjoyed fishing with his buddies, often going on trips. Because of this, my mother-in-law started to come over more often when he was out. What bothered me was her sleeping on our white living room sofa, no matter how many times I told her not to, even laying out a futon on the floor. Mother-in-law, please don't sleep on the white sofa. This is a rented place, I would say. Oh, sorry about that. It's just so comfy that I end up sleeping here without realizing, she would reply. Initially, my mother-in-law behaved like a guest, but gradually she started acting as if it was her own house. She was careless with the furniture and appliances, and I was constantly worried she might damage something. Hey, don't you think you're coming over too often? This isn't our house. You should hold back a little, I told her. What? Let me enjoy it too. This kind of lifestyle doesn't come around often. Plus, you've been asking me to clean the house every time I come. It's been handy for you, right? She replied. Peter hadn't corrected the lie he told my mother-in-law. Since he started dressing properly, he's become really sloppy at home. Having my mother-in-law around to easily ask to tidy up must have been convenient for him. But the cleaning she was supposedly doing only happened at the beginning. "Laura, the house is a mess. Don't just sit there, vacuum the floor. The bathroom is soaking wet," she would scold when I got home from work. Peter was influenced by his mother and started blaming me, increasing my stress after coming home. Yet since my father-in-law was often away from their house, I felt somewhat relieved that the situation couldn't get much worse. But as my mother-in-law's visits increased, another source of stress piled up for me. My husband has been coming home late a lot. Sometimes he comes back drunk in the middle of the night, or he doesn't come home until morning. Often, I can smell perfume on him. When I ask him about it, he says he's just been trying out new bars. "Cut it out already," I tell him. "It's fine to go out for drinks, but coming home in the morning isn't normal. And how much are you spending on drinks anyway? I give you enough for your expenses, don't I?" But he just says, "How I use my money is my business. Just leave it." I was shocked because he never used to talk like that. But there was more I had to confront him about. "You've been wearing Frank's suits from the closet, haven't you? Do you think that's okay? You've used Julie's clothes and bags without asking, right?" I was stunned. Did he think it was okay to just use anything in the house as he pleased? "I always get permission and take them to the cleaners afterward. Have you got permission from Frank?" "Well, you handle that part. Make it sound good," he said casually. "Frank's suits are really cool. They fit me perfectly since we're about the same height, and I get a lot of compliments." I was furious. Of course, the suits of our landlord, who could afford such a nice house, would be stylish. If he ruined them, there's no way he could afford to replace them. "Stop it. Stop it right now. Take care of what you've used, and don't ever wear them again. Would you quit nagging? Seriously, you're so annoying. I'm in my prime for attracting attention. If you keep this up, I'm out of here." Divorce. I mean it. I felt as if a century-long love had gone cold. The man in front of me was no longer the husband I knew. But then an unexpected event happened. My father-in-law had an accident while out fishing and passed away. Caught up with funeral arrangements, I had forgotten about these problems. But after the 55-day mourning period, my husband dropped a bombshell. "I've decided to have Mom move in with us." I almost dropped my cup when he suddenly declared that. "What? You can't just spring that on me. It's not possible here. Mom's really sad being all alone suddenly, so I thought we'd live together for a while. But how can you decide that on your own? She'll move in next week?" "Next week? Why didn't you discuss this with me sooner?" "Sorry, but I thought you'd understand, Laura." Gosh, I was upset by the sudden news. But I thought if it was just for a short time, maybe I could handle it. I was worried about my mother-in-law, who had just lost her husband. But the way my husband decided they should live with us without asking me made me feel betrayed. The next week, to my surprise, my mother-in-law arrived with movers. "What's all this about?" I asked. She replied, "This place is much more comfortable than my old house." I thought, why not, and sold the house to move here. Looking at my husband, he was grinning at me. "I told you we were going to have Mom move in, right?" But I reminded him, "I said it wasn't possible here, and you said it was only for a while. This house is big enough. One more person won't hurt," he argued. He had planned to live with his mother here all along. I didn't know what he had told his mother, but her selling her own house to move in gave me a headache. Then my husband said something even more absurd. "This is my house. You'll follow the head of the household's orders and take care of Mom." Head of the household. What are you talking about? This house is borrowed from Julie, remember? Had he forgotten such an important detail? "I know, but right now, who's paying the steep rent?" "Me, right. My husband has always been indifferent to money and possessions, but I never imagined he'd be so careless to barely remember details about this house. When he was single, Peter lived in a cheap apartment that cost just $1,000 a month, so I can understand why he'd think $45,000 a month for rent seems outrageously expensive. But did he seriously believe someone would rent us this property for such a price? If you can't listen to your husband, then pack up and leave. You've become so annoying with all your nagging lately, he said. That's right. Thanks to me, we're living this good life, and here you are complaining like an ungrateful spouse. I felt like I finally understood my husband's scheme. Ever since we moved into this house and started getting attention, he probably found my reminders about his spending habits and coming home late annoying. He's trying to kick me out without even realizing his massive misunderstanding. Fine, I'll leave. But are you sure that's what you want? Yeah, I'm done with you. I'm going to live here with Mom. With Dad's inheritance and the money from selling the family home, we'll be just fine. I'll send the divorce papers to the salon later. So that's what he called his mother. I could have argued here, but I decided to let them face reality on their own. Biting back my retort, I packed my things into a suitcase and silently left the house. Once outside the apartment, I sighed deeply and called my cousin, G, who was overseas. What? No way. I'm not going to let him treat you like that. Just wait a month. Once I'm ready, I'll come back home. Julie was very angry with Peter's actions and decided to come back home 7 months earlier than planned. About a month later, I got a call from Peter. I had already received the divorce papers right after leaving, but I knew this call wasn't about that. I thought about ignoring it, but the phone kept ringing. Reluctantly, I answered and heard Peter say, "Laura, finally, the management company says the rent hasn't been paid. I've been making the payments as usual. Please, can you check with Julie what's going on?" "Did you check the bank account?" I asked. "Yeah, it's got $2,000 in it," he replied. I almost burst out laughing. I hadn't made any deposits into that account and had withdrawn the balance after leaving the apartment. With just $2,000, you won't even cover the utility bills, let alone the rent. How embarrassing it must be to live in a luxury apartment and have your electricity cut off. Why didn't you leave enough money in there? Why should I pay the utilities for a place I don't even live in anymore? I responded. He went silent, probably realizing the absurdity of his request. "You have the day off tomorrow, right? I'll come over so we can talk." Yeah, sure. I'd appreciate it." He sounded deflated even through the phone. That's what he gets for overstepping. I'll make sure he cleans up his own mess the next day. I went to the apartment with Julie, who had just returned from abroad. I could have used my key, but I rang the doorbell out of courtesy. It was my mother-in-law who answered the door. "Yes, who is it?" "Laura, why are you back? Didn't you get a divorce?" "Yes, I did. I'm here to have you vacate the apartment," I told her. She was shocked, and Peter showed his face behind her, looking guilty. He hadn't told her about the current situation yet. But the moment he saw Julie standing behind me, his eyes widened. "Julie, why are you here?" "I got a call from Laura and had to come back to the States on short notice," Julie explained. "Oh, this is Mr. David, the owner and manager of this apartment," I added as we walked into the living room. Mr. David had said he would sit in with us as we had our discussion. I was shocked by what I saw. Even though only a month had passed, the once lovely space looked like a storage room. Boxes of my mother-in-law's moving items were piled up at the end of the living room, still unpacked. Julie sighed softly beside me as we all sat down on the couch. Mr. David, the landlord, spoke first. "So about the rent for this month. When can I expect the payment?" Well, I had deposited the usual $2,000 into the account, but it seems like it hasn't been withdrawn," my husband said in a sweaty, murmuring voice, his hair messy as in the old days. "Did you seriously think it was $22,000? Didn't I ask you to pay just half of the rent at first?" Mr. David asked. "What? No way. Half? You mean it's actually $7,000? Peter looked shocked and began to scratch his head frantically. That's right, $7,000. But actually the rent here is $40,000. Mr. David corrected. What? What kind of figure is that? Maybe I only heard about the amount we were supposed to pay, my husband stammered, meaning the amount he thought he was supposed to pay. Beside my husband, my mother-in-law also looked stunned. What? $350,000. This is the apartment Peter was borrowing from an acquaintance, right? No, this apartment belongs to Julie, whom I rent from. We had a 4-year lease, but decided to terminate it 7 months early due to this situation, I explained. My mother-in-law's face turned pale as she kept hitting Peter's knee. What are we going to do? I sold my house thinking Peter was earning well, and I've been shopping a lot too. What are we going to do? She started trembling, covering her mouth with her hands before turning back to Julie and pleading. Julie, can Peter and I sign a lease for $2,000 just for half a year? I can't give up living here so suddenly. Julie's mouth turned into a frown at my mother-in-law's bold request. Look, Laura, help me out here. You know you're welcome to move back in too, she said to me. I felt my own mouth turning into a frown just like Julie. I rented this place to support Laura's hard work. I will forgive anyone who tries to kick her out, Julie stated firmly, turning her gaze to Peter, who closed his eyes and looked down. Leaving this place was no longer just a simple matter. And to think how carelessly you've treated things, this sofa, for instance. I can't even bring myself to use it anymore. Julie frowned at the stains and dirt on the once pristine white leather sofa. I was planning for you to buy the heavily worn items after 3 years, so I'll be doing a check now. Wait a minute, I wasn't informed about this, Peter said, sounding utterly ridiculous. You'd normally restore a rental to its original state before returning it. It's only right to compensate if you've misused the furniture and appliances we let you use, I explained. I said this before, but considering you didn't even remember the rent, such details were unlikely to have stuck in your mind, I replied. Julie walked around the apartment, checking everything from the kitchen. I heard many sighs, so it was likely that the appliances would need to be bought. Opening the bedroom closet, Julie eyed even deeper. Peter, did you wear Frank's suits without permission? I didn't agree to lend your personal items, and you've treated these quite roughly, too. Sorry, but you'll definitely be buying these at full price. Just as I thought, despite being told not to wear them anymore, every suit left in the closet was over $20,000. The only silver lining was that Peter had only worn 3 suits. Peter, I'm so disappointed in you. I trusted you with this house because of you and Laura. I have no sympathy for someone who's hurt my dear Laura, Julie said. Peter's face went pale, shaking violently. The amount Julie suggested for the purchases was substantial. Mr. David then began to speak. As for me, I'd like you to pay this month's rent of $50,000, along with a cleaning fee for the room. The rent of $8,000 here is strictly under the contract with Laura, not with you, and I need you to vacate the place as soon as possible. But it's impossible to just leave like that, Peter pleaded. Laura, please ask her on my behalf too. His mother-in-law, who had been downcast, suddenly raised her face and cried out loudly, Why should I? I've already submitted the divorce papers that Peter sent, so we're strangers now. I have no obligation to help a stranger, I replied. Mr. David looked at the mother-in-law with a pitying gaze, yet firmly presented a harsh reality. If you can't vacate immediately, I'll have to sue for illegal occupation. Why do I have to go through this? I can't stand this anymore. The mother-in-law screamed and stood up, then left the room. Peter was stunned for a while, as if his soul had left him, but then looked at me with a plea for help. Laura, I'm sorry. I finally woken up. I got carried away thinking I was rich and lost my mind, Peter said. That's right, you seem to have come to your senses, I told Peter. "Sorry, it really was all my fault. Let's start over from scratch in a new place," he said. But no matter what he said now, it no longer touched my heart. Our trust was broken, and I had also overheard that Peter had been fooling around with other women. It's not going to work. Like I said earlier, we're already divorced. Besides, even though I filed for divorce and moved on after a month, I have no regrets and I've moved on completely, I said, looking back at my husband with a full smile. He seemed to give up and asked in a quiet voice, "You've been covering everything but half the rent, haven't you? By the way, how much are you earning now?" I realized we hadn't talked about work in a long time. I've just started making over $118,000 a month. Looks like I might reach $125,000 by the end of the year, I replied. "No way. Why didn't you tell me? Please give us another chance," Peter pleaded, sliding off the sofa and starting to cry, collapsing onto the floor, his hair still tousled from sleep. I wished he would remain that bed-headed boy. No matter how much our standard of living had risen, thinking this made me feel a bit sad, despite having thought I was over it. Soon after, perhaps scared by the mention of illegal occupation, they rented a monthly apartment and left. It seems they managed to pay off their debts with the inheritance from Peter's father and by selling their family home. But their finances must be pretty tight now. Well, it's not that Peter isn't earning badly, and if he lives within his means, he should be able to manage. After the divorce, Peter contacted me just once to apologize. I have no intention of getting back together, but I genuinely wish him the best. He lamented then that it's hard to lower your standard of living once it's gone up, referring to living with his mother, who enjoyed her hobbies and luxuries. I'm worried about their future. I didn't ask for alimony from Peter. Some might think that's too forgiving, but I believe that I was the one who changed. Being in that luxurious environment, I adapted to a mindset that this lifestyle was normal, and it helped me earn more. Thanks to that, my efforts are reaching new heights. But Peter and his mother just used that environment to increase their standard of living without realizing their delusion. Now, I live alone in a $4,200 rental. Though I'm not at Julie's level yet, I feel like I've come a long way from the times when paying $2,500 rent was a struggle. I believe in myself and want to continue making